fruits. When it comes to seasons, spring and Easter in general are probably my least favorite ones when it comes to house decorations. Because I just find all those bunnies and chickens, they're just not my cup of tea. But because I'm a modeler, I kind of like the idea of painting eggs. And they have a little bit of sentimental value for me because when I was little, my mom used to decorate them using old school water slide decals. And I had this idea of painting eggs in armor modeling styles pretty much since I started this channel, but I never had the time because of all those tight deadlines. So I thought, why not this year? Just for plain old stupid fun. And if things go well, maybe I might end up with a nice house decoration. So let's see what we can do. These eggs are meant to be hanged from a branch, so they originally came with a small rope. Removing it leaves a large hole that needs to be filled, and a combination of superglue, CA filler, and CA accelerator are the best combo for this task. As you probably guessed, I chose plastic eggs because they're more convenient than real ones, but they also come with a few shortcomings that need to be addressed. Thankfully, Tamiya modeling putty adheres to almost any surface, and depending on the thickness of our application, it can be sanded almost instantly, just after a few minutes. While I had the putty at hand, I decided to improve the surface a little by stippling some subtle irregular texture. At this stage, I didn't really know if I wanted to depict these eggs as a parody of some cast metal military ordnance or just regular eggs painted in military colors, but either way, the subtle texture would be beneficial for both scenarios. Also, there was no way I was going to touch them during the painting process, so I made a few basic sticks from leftover sprues. The hole where the sprue enters the egg will also determine the bottom portion, which will stay out of sight in the end. And I almost forgot to give the surface a bit of gentle polishing with a fine sanding sponge. The stippled putty can leave a few grainy textures here and there, which don't quite look the part and would actually make our paint job look worse. With the construction phase completed, we can immediately dig our heels into the fun part, airbrushing. I recently ran out of black primer and couldn't find it in stock, but a dark brown mahogany one will suffice for us tonight. I decided to airbrush one egg at a time, starting with the American one because it's the easiest to paint. Not only I recently painted a Marine Sherman in olive drab, but also this paint is one of the easiest to post shade. If you have a good base color, you can push the faded highlights anywhere you want, be it warm yellowish tones or something less saturated with buff or even light gray. The second one in line was the Soviet egg. 4BO is another paint that's fun to work with because once again you can choose different routes with post shading. AK real colors can be mixed with Tamiya paints without any issues, and they both thin really well with Mr. Color's leveling thinner. It's an absolute win-win combo for me. And finally, the German egg. All these base coats are a good exercise for the most popular paint schemes from World War II, and the shape of the egg lends itself to some very simple yet effective paint gradation ranging from the darkest dark brown tone at the bottom to an extreme highlight on the upper surface. This one definitely had to wear a camouflage, and I chose a simple two-tone camo, which I find the most attractive, because it's subtle, the colors complement each other, and there's not too much color variety on the finished piece. Making up my own camouflage on the fly was one of my biggest weaknesses, so I was very glad for this opportunity. AK Real colors are fantastic for these jobs because they come in pretty accurate shades, and no matter how you decide to post shade each color, the result is gonna look very nice. So if you're interested in something from AK, I have an affiliate link in the video description as well as a sales coupon for a small discount on your order. Go check it out. Let's now apply some decals. It's becoming more and more popular to apply them directly on the painted surface, but I still like to play it safe and old school with a generous coat of clear varnish. I managed to find a handful of leftover decals in my spare box from different manufacturers. It was quite a surprise to find out that mini art decals, which I took from my Chevrolet truck, are by far the best ones from the bunch. The carrier film is very sticky, so they don't even need a decal setting solution, and they're so thin that they can trace the textured surface. To a certain extent, of course. I used a decal softening solution from VMS on all three of them, but the mini art ones needed this treatment the least. The Soviet tactical numbers are from Tamiya's IS-2 heavy tank. They need to be persuaded a lot more with the decal solution, but can be effectively hammered into the gritty surface. And lastly, the German markings come from Dragon, but I don't remember the specific kit. These were the stiffest, and I didn't manage to fully integrate them into the surface because the print was quite thick. Next up, I gave each egg a very generous coat of VMS satin varnish diluted ever so slightly with their dedicated acrylic thinner. The Soviet egg received a coat of chipping medium because invasion stripes were hastily painted by hand in real life. There are multiple ways to paint them, but the most efficient method for me, which doesn't require any masking or meticulous work with paintbrushes, is to simply spray them over a layer of chipping fluid, and then use that to remove the soft airbrushed edges, and while doing so, also add a bit of chipping. Now I can use this as a roadmap for brush painting, and because we already have a pretty opaque layer of white, all that's needed are a few quick brush strokes to give the surface that authentic, hand-applied look. Another way to enhance this look is adding a few runs of paint, and these have to be applied carefully with a pointy brush, always keeping the direction of gravity in mind. I also wanted to play around with those new inks from AK. I already tried this brownish black one on my Sherman, and here I used it to enhance the shadowed lower half. It was also nice to try adding a slight shadow gradient on the markings because, yes, you were all right. These should be post-shaded and weathered as well. But it's not always just about darkening. I tried a bit of fading on the German decals with highly diluted white ink. This made a world of difference and beautifully blended them with the camouflage. Finally, I covered these areas with another layer of satin varnish. Just like with AK, you can get VMS products at a better price if you click the links in the video description and use the discount codes I left you there. Of course, I wanted to include a bit of weathering as well, but I still wasn't sure if I wanted to slap every common armor weathering technique on them. Something about chipped, rusty and muddy eggs just didn't sit right with me, and I had to remind myself that this project was meant to be dumb fun, nothing more. So I decided to give them a very subtle wash over the entire surface to slightly bring out the texture and add a little bit of dirt in some places. This way, they might look like your regular eggs, just painted in military colors with a small hint of dirt. Of course, we have to be careful with washes over certain areas, such as the white invasion stripes or the American stars, but on the other hand, if applied with moderation, even this technique can enhance their look. It also shows you how different paint schemes work with different shades of the wash, and how a quick round of subtle speckling can add a lot of visual texture and fine detail, even if it's not gonna be immediately noticeable. Once the wash is dried, I was very pleased with the result. I often say how a post-shaded model with nicely applied pin wash could be everything you need for a nice, clean-looking yet exciting finish, and this is pretty much exactly what I was talking about. Let's now make a simple diorama from this weathered metal Easter bowl. I used a hot glue gun and moss, which can be often found in floral arrangements. My goal was to apply the moss at a small incline towards the center, so the eggs would look nested in, so to say, instead of falling out of the bowl. Someone would say the natural moss color with its combination of deep green and dry yellowish tones is the best thing about this stuff, but I like to play with the airbrush a lot, so I unified those textures and post-shaded everything a little with a combination of vibrant green and yellow. At this point, I could finally snap off the sprue handles and start gluing eggs to the arrangement. Once again, I used hot glue, which is gonna hold them just enough so they won't fall out. Something I often notice in these types of work is the remnants of hot glue in the form of these thin hairs. I just made sure to remove them with a pair of tweezers. And that pretty much sums it up, my friends. Okay, I'll admit that I'm not much of an arranger and I'm much more confident with paints. Not so much with moss, dry grass, twigs and other floral supplies. I also think it's safe to say that there's little to no educational value to be found here, but I think it's okay to go for plain old stupid fun for at least once in a few years. Anyway, I won't drag this outro any longer because I'm itching for some scenic modeling, so I'll just wish you a happy Easter and leave with a huge thank you for the bottom of my heart, because it's thanks to you that I can make scale models for a living, and even do something ridiculous like this. My Patreon members also play a huge role in this thanks to their incredible generosity, and in fact my Patreon page is like an online magazine subscription because I post there pretty often, and you'll get updates from my workbench where I share my thoughts and insights. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos and those stay there forever so you can always get back to them. I also have some small extra goodies such as 3D models which you can use for detailing your projects, a bunch of real-life references for nature, old buildings and so on, and last but not least, higher resolution studio photos which show my models in a lot of detail. So yeah, let's now get back to proper modeling, and that means building a Saipan 1944 vignette for my USMC Sherman from the previous video. Until then, you all stay safe, stay awesome, build your models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!